I'm Sanjoy. I'm a program director for the tech programs in Vired. Before that, I have around 15, was it 13, 14 years of experience in the industry. I come from the industry. I started my career in 2008. In Infosys, we started, building code in COBOL. So I'm pretty old. I've seen the world of mainframe and DP2 and everything. Started my journey as a COBOL developer. Uh, seen uh, Seen the whole movement from COBOL to Java, Java to Can you hear me, guys? Can you hear me, guys?
Yes,
I'm
yes, we
audible.
can hear
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, yeah,
Lost you for a second, but you're
Seen the
back.
whole journey from COBOL to Java, Java to today's world of full stack. And last 6 to 7 years of my career was pretty much as an architect. So can call me a cloud architect, solution architect, whatever you want to put in. I worked as an architect, was very much working with the deployment piece and one of the starting pieces of DevOps. So we as I think we started working on DevOps in a company called Great American Insurance, GIC. I was working for an independent consultant there. So their CTO started talking about this whole idea of CI/CD. That's like 9 years back. I was one of the first one to look at the transition, that when typically people move from a deployment piece to a much more operational piece, to much more development being added, moved into something like a DevOps architecture. So I have seen the world moving and how DevOps and today's growth of this whole technology world is all interconnected. And then left everything, wanted to start my own startup, build three products, and both are very high volume product, was able to scale it, but not good at business. So I think my edtech startup kind of failed because I'm not able to the scale, not the scale the product, but the scale the business. And I sold my e-commerce product to a pretty big company. That's about me. And then I joined Wired. We wanted to work with people. We wanted to be interesting work in education because I always wanted to work in education. That's about me. I have Prashant with me. Prashant is one of the most senior faculty, one of the most loved faculty across Wired. So DevOps, he teaches DevOps, he teaches FSD, he teaches cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is another offering that's going to come in. So he's kind of the all-rounder but his experience primarily come with building application, deploying applications. Again, because we both have worked in startup environment, we have built it. We build applications. We have built. My voice is breaking. Manoj, is it okay now?
yeah. It is okay for me, I guess.
Manoj, is it breaking for everyone? Mahima, can you just confirm?
Sanjoy,
Okay.
I can hear you. It's
Okay.
pretty clear.
Pretty clear, right? Okay. So because we both are from startups, so we have seen the world. We build application. We are able to do things from scratch. The whole course is also like the experience that we bring to the table is how do we build things from scratch? How we can build a DevOps piece from scratch. How do you build an application from scratch? Application deployment from scratch. I have worked in MNCs for 10 years, so I know how to build a process and how the whole startup and the build things from scratch and the processes can come together. Now let's come to today's topic. I think we are in brink of a revolution. I kept on talking to the different forums that there are three kinds of revolution that happened in last 20-25 years. One of them when Richard Dell decided to invent Node. We started building JS can be used as a backend application, and that changed the way we look at FSD. We look at started building application. That's one of them. Second, when we started talking about DevOps, we talked about CI/CD pipelining and specifically the advent of Kubernetes. Right, when people thought about the applications can be deployed in smaller microservices and can be controlled, can be orchestrated in a different way, which says that high volume applications can be run with 60-65% of the cost, and a 65% reduction of the cost which has been paid to cloud service providers. Yes, the third one is obviously ChatGPT. Everybody is worried about it, everybody is excited about it, depends on what kind of framework that you're coming in. Now this particular webinar we'll talk about little bit about generative AI. Yes, generative AI, we're not going to talk about a lot about Bard. We're not going to talk a lot about other generative AI modules. The whole demonstration would be mostly based on ChatGPT. I will try to play. So this whole structure would be, I'll have Prashant with me. So I'll try to play the role of a kind of navigating the whole piece. Prashant will talk about how ChatGPT is going to impact the whole DevOps world, how ChatGPT can be used as from a DevOps engineer perspective, from a DevOps lead perspective, and the most important thing, what is the future? Is it really a threat to us as a DevOps lead or a DevOps engineer, or is it something uh, that will navigate, that would give us enough impetus to become better DevOps engineer, or DevOps lead? I believe I kind of, because I love ChatGPT, I love innovation. A lot of people don't like me on that way as well. But I am a big advocate of generative AI. So I kind of want to discuss about Prashant, and there might be certain risks that even Harari has said. I think I'm a huge fan of Yuval Harari. He said that generative AI is it's not something which is beneficial for human. But we'll just talk about the whole scapes on a DevOps perspective, and probably we will try to understand which seems like a threat to a developing world, to a coding world. How do we make this an opportunity? How do we ride this ChatGPT wave to learn DevOps, and most importantly, be very good at things? Very how do we use it as an efficient tool? How do we use it efficiently to become better DevOps engineer, DevOps lead? That's the whole idea, right? Just to start, to set a little bit of a context, I want to make this a little bit more contextualized. How many people in the group, can you please raise a hand, or I just write an yes? How many people already here coming with a DevOps background, has some sort of a DevOps background? Can you guys please raise your hand? Knows what DevOps is, what is Revant is DevOps batch. Okay, Revant. Okay, so you know what Prashant is. Okay. Uh, who else, guys? Who comes with a DevOps background? I think I kind of have 32 people in here. Five here, five people, five. Lokesh is part batch 2. Who else, guys? I can see there are 5 hands, right? So skill up program in DevOps. Okay, Manoj. So have you worked in DevOps at all, Manoj? Have you built anything, deployed certain things? Is that necessary for coding? No, it is not. Yes, Aisha, I will explain that. I will explain that. Generative AI in simple words. I'm from batch 2. Again, a lot of people from batch 2. Wonderful. Okay. So I think we'll try to explain generative AI in a perspective of a developer. I am not a data scientist. I am not an ML ops expert. I'm not a machine learning expert. I'm not a data scientist. I am purely in the building side of it, development side of it, working with full stack and DevOps, right? These are my skills, building applications. So I'll have a understanding which is here to explain a bit of generative AI. I will so generative AI is there's look at I should look at it from a black box perspective, right? It is generating something for you based on an input that you're giving. Let's assume there's a the best way this is not the way I said. I've heard it somewhere that they said that treat generative AI or chat GPT or something as a Harvard assistant. So who knows everything, right? So you tell that Harvard intern, you have a Harvard intern you hired. You went to that guy. He said, "Dude, I need to know this. Can you do a research on this?" So he will what exactly is going to go through? He's going to go through all over the internet and then write a paper for you, right? You get to an intern. You said that all of you can you create a, let's take that example. I am running um a company which provides tours and travels. So I have an intern in my company. I went to that intern, say then I have got a query from a guy who wants to travel to northern Europe. So probably Iceland and Georgia and Norway and all of this. They want to go there. So can you create an itinerary for that particular person? He has probably a $10,000 budget. So can you do that? So that particular person will go through internet, will take around 4 or 5 days, create an itinerary for you, do some research, 2 or 3 options, going to create an itinerary for you, right? That intern is going to do that, right? Now think about generative AI or a chat GPT as that intern who can do that for you, doing that research all over the internet and write in his own words. It is very important, write in his own words, and but do it not in 4 days, do it in 4 hours, right? Do it in probably not in 4 hours, 4 minutes, 4 seconds. So that's what the way we should be looking at a generative AI from a developer perspective, who is not trying to understand it from MLOps perspective, from fine tuning perspective, from somebody who wants to use generative AI as a black box, because there are multiple facets to this, and DevOps is not at all concerned how generative AI is working. It the whole webinar and what we are concerned at this point of time is that how we can use generative AI in our advantage. Okay, so Aisha, does that answer your question? Don't know. Okay. Okay. So we'll start the whole. So I want to have this in a very podcast format because I have a lot of questions for Prashant, coming from a generative AI perspective, and purely from a typical query perspective, that how do we impact things in DevOps. I have a list of questions I want Prashant to answer, and probably I will chip in with my industry experience and how, and I would like all of you to come in and contribute to this conversation, right? We want this to be not like a webinar, not like a one-way conversation. We want all of you to come in and be part of this conversation, and have questions. So I'll try to drive this whole conversation, but I want all of you to kind of chip in and make this a brainstorming session with Prashant. Okay. So Prashant, welcome. I kind of given a bit of introduction of yours.
Thanks a lot,
If you
Sanjay.
can kind of give a couple of minutes of introduction of yourself, and then we can start the session.
Perfect. So, thanks a lot, Sanjay, and happy Raksha Bandhan to everyone. It's my pleasure to come on here and give a talk about, especially about one of the interesting topic today.
Prashant, your
And
volume is very low. Can you? Yeah.
am I audible now? Hello.
Yes, it's better now, Prashant.
Better, right? Okay. So I'm like very very fortunate enough in coming back and talking about this interesting topic on the generative AI. Right. And what I have seen in past in couple of years, because I worked with giants like Google, BMW, I work in the startup ecosystem as well. So coming back, I have seen a fair bit amount of the advancement in the technology as well, and also the struggling part. When I say the struggling part, I mean struggling with the newbie. So when you're working there, in a startup culture, you tend not to spend a lot of money. You tend to spend have a limited number of resources and want to get the maximum amount of output. However, when you are working with giants like the top of 500 fortune companies, or the kind of things which is actually in place, when you talk about these, they actually focus on more on the R&D side. So I've seen both of the side of the industry as well. And it's very very fascinating to see how the industry has changed in the past couple of years, and especially about introduction of the this model like GPT, which basically is like a generative pre-trained model out there. And so when we talk about the generative AI, just a background of the generative AI. So generative AI is that mostly two kinds of generative AI we have. One is a GAN model and another is a GPT model. Okay, GAN is kind of old model which mostly works on the more realistic image. So if you are focused on a more realistic image, GAN is kind of like the model for you. Now, when you work on a thought process, like thinking like a human and the language kind of thing. So, for example, let's say I want to say, hey, can you give me a particular route? I want to go from Delhi to, let's say, Hyderabad, right? Now, a normal, if you ask a question to a normal Google search, it will say, hey, look, just take a, taxi, or just take a fly from here to there. However, if you ask a normal human, hey, I want to go to Hyderabad, for example, he'll give you exact complete detail. Hey, why don't you just go to this particular bus stand, take this number of bus, go to this place, get a flight ticket, go something like that. Now, this understanding, explaining like a human in predicting, what can be the next output is what the GPT stand for, right? So again, it's more like how we get to know about the information which is already available, and we modify, we predict the next kind of like the output. Anyway, so that is like more of the generative AI in general. Now, when we talk about the DevOps perspective, and I'm going to limit my conversation to DevOps itself. A lot of fuss has been around in the industry that, hey, look, this GPT is going to take a job. Now, thing is, so we always have a discussion, among ourselves, and Sanjay always mentioned this interesting, thing as well. Whenever there is so Sanjay, do you want to say that?
I
Please.
no, that's okay.
So Sanjay has this, very, very interesting idea. Whenever, there is something bad going on, it's always an opportunity. Okay. It's always an opportunity in the midst of everything. Even if, for example, you had a corona, okay, I'm obviously not in favor of having a corona, obviously, COVID or something, but you had a COVID, and there are people who actually took the benefit of it and made a huge bucks out of it, right? Now you want to call them whatever you want, but at the end of the day, they were in the benefit. So the same thing goes around the GPT as well. Yes, GPT, yeah, so chaos is a ladder. Exactly, exactly. Kanyakup, so I mean, this is a very fascinating thing about the Sanjay as well. Like, he keeps on mentioning. So if there is a chaos, you always have an opportunity. So you don't treat chaos as a chaos, you treat it as an opportunity. Now, what we saw GPT as not a threat, but more like an assistant. Okay. And we talk about the assistant is like, just imagine that you want to hire a Stanford, just now what Sanjay mentioned, you want to hire a Stanford graduate as a, intern, and probably you might not have, afford to hire something like that because they have limited number of resources. But with the help of the, GPT or the language model which is around, okay, you can hire probably the best of the minds. Obviously, there are, I'm not saying that they are 100% correct or something. There are some downsides as well, but it gets the most of the work out. So when we talk about now, when we take this interesting thing and we talk about the DevOps, DevOps is an interesting field. It evolved in past couple of years. In a huge manner. Like there was a tremendous development in the past couple of years. New tools coming across, and the current interesting fact is that every few months you see across new tools, or some new development has been made. The complete documentation has changed and stuff like that. So there are a lot of challenges out there with the DevOps, but at the same time, we just need to innovate ourselves. Now, where does this GPT come into play? How do we plug to it in? So a lot of things where you want to do a lot of manual output. Okay, a couple of examples I'm just giving, and then we'll actually go across and we'll talk more on that. For example, let's say you want to write a Docker file. Okay, and you want to Dockerize an application. You have no idea about how to write a Dockerized application. Someone mentioned, hey, look, if you write a containers and stuff, good to go. So you saw a couple of YouTube videos, couple of videos here and there. You saw, okay, I understood the concept of containers, I understand everything, stuff like that. But how do I proceed? What are the steps and stuff like? And that is exactly where this particular intern will not be an intern, but will be a educator to you. Okay, can help you, can guide you to the right solution. Now there are downsides because we already know it's an AI which has been trained to the model of 2021, if I'm not wrong. Right. So there are a couple of documentation which will come across which is already deprecated. Okay. But interesting thing is it still gets you to some sort of the work where probably you would have like zero idea altogether. Right. So this is where the DevOps have been utilizing. So you should not treat the GPT as a threat, but more like a personal assistant, wherever you have to do, repetitive tasks, where you have to write a piece of code, where you want to, for example, you got a Docker file and you have no idea this Docker file is not working. What might be an error, right? So you ask the chat GPT, hey, there's a Docker file and I want to get this particular task done. And that for that, obviously, you need to have a proper prompting, as well. So Sanjay is kind of like, prompt genius. So he will, kind of like, give a background about the prompt engineering. So you ask the proper prompt that, this is this, and I want to get this task done, and I have this, Docker file, but this is not working. Can just help me out of this. And ChatGPT will actually exactly write you the complete documentation for that, right? Explaining you about every single line, what are changes and everything based upon the responses that you get. So yeah, that is something which the
So,
GPT can
so just to
explain.
interjecting here, Prashant. So, Prashant, I understand that you're saying that ChatGPT being gives us a lot of opportunity. So, can we give us probably couple of business case studies that you think, and maybe if you can show us something which is live, that how and 100% explain, because we have a lot of people who are new to DevOps here, right? If you cannot just create something which is, and if you're getting into something which is a little deeper, and then explain this what actually it is used for, and then use maybe a bit of a generative AI to build that, right? How actually it can help it, how can it works as an opportunity for a DevOps person. If you can give us like a couple of or three, 2 or 3 case studies, that would be great.
Perfect, perfect.
Sure, but
So
Prashant, you need to make your you need to keep the, yeah, just keep it a little closer. It's your voice, we're just kind of losing you in between.
okay, yeah, I guess this might be a problem with my microphone. I'm not sure
Yeah.
about that, right? So I hope like my mic is, I'm audible, right? Right? Okay.
Or I'm getting old. I might be needing a little more higher end.
Oh, no, I don't think so. Anyway, so let's actually like, this is interesting. So I'll kind of like, keep this thing short and we'll talk about, let's say, a Docker. Okay. Now, we know from the theoretical part, couple of you who already have an idea of the Docker, couple of you have not idea of the Docker. Let's say what is the Docker. So, for example, I have an application. Let's say the application is written on Node.js. Okay, and Node.js is one of the backend, framework where you can write like the backend code and everything, and just run the backend code for that matter. Now, let's say a piece of developer, a developer basically gave me a Node.js based code and asked me to deploy this application. Now, there are, different ways I can deploy the application. I can go and like, just run a couple of commands, deploy the application. But the right way would have been to work on the containers. Okay. Now, what is containers? Okay. So just think in a way that, and I like to explain it in a way that because I am a Bengali and I love food. So I like to explain it in a way that I want to eat food. So let's say you have a plate and I ask you to, hey, I'm going to give you rice. I want to give you some lentils. I want to give you some, sabji. I want to give you some kheer. I want to give you one mithai. Just imagine that what if I just put everything in one place? Just take a plate, put everything in one plate. How would the, food look like? How would it taste like? Will it taste good? Would it taste good? Would you like to have that kind of food? And just to add on top of it, I also like salad. So I'm just going to put some salad on top of like, the sweets and the kheer and the chawal and the dal and like, the sabji. And on the top of salad, I'm just also putting like, the lemon on top of it. How would you like to have? Would you like to have that kind of food? Anyone? I would like to see anyone who would like to try that kind of food. No one? Go on. Okay. Right. So the idea is like, it's just a complete chaos in that man. Right. Now, what do we do? The ideal solution to do it, and it's just a like, the right way is that you put everything in small bowls. What do you say? Okay, fine. I'm just going to put lentils in a small bowl. I'm going to put, my salad in a small bowl. I'm going to put kheer in a small bowl. I'm going to put my vegetables in a small bowl. Exactly the same thing. So what we are going to say, we are going to say this bowl as a container, right? So one container is for dals, one container is for like, the vegetables, one container is for key, one container is for sweets, one container is for XYZ, whatever the items you have. And exactly that is exactly what the Docker basically gives, give it to you. So what Docker does is it basically helps you in containerizing the application. So let's say when you have a Node.js application, and if I ask you to deploy an application, this normal ways would be that you take a server, you install Node.js, whatever the command that you write, apt-get install Node.js, apt-get install npm, you run all this command, you install all the required software, you record everything, and then you run your application. Now let's say your application is running on Node version 18, which is pretty cool. I install Node version 18, my application is running, I'm done. Now the developers came across and say, Prashant, I have this another microservice which is also written and which is going to be working together, but this is written in Node 16. Okay, what are you going to do? Are you going to uninstall this and then install the Node 16? Or are you going to install both them on the sideways? Because if you install both of them sideways, there will be a versioning conflict. Too much of problems. Now, obviously, there are ways around. You can actually, probably get around with that, but it is frustrating. It is frustrating and probably not the right approach to work around with that. So what we do, we take the concept of food, just now what we did. So what we do, we take a container, we say, okay, in this container, I'm going to run all the Node 18 project. So I'm going to install Node 18 in this particular container. I'm going to put all my code, all the configuration, everything into this container for Node 18. This container is going to be Node 16 and all the configuration, everything. Now I want to run both the containers. I open a machine and I run both the containers. That's it. So now the single machine, which is a host machine, it does not need to have any particular node into it. It just needs to now run this container. And this container inside it has all the configuration, all the installation being done. Right. So this is a very, very layman way of explaining how the Docker and container is. Now, so understanding about the containers, which is totally fine. Now the problem is, let's say I was given this Node.js code. I have no idea about how to proceed with that. Right. So what don't I I will try to act like a stupid layman person who has no idea about I just saw this particular video of Prashant Kumar Day, which is a pretty cool video. Okay. I subscribe to his channel, I subscribe to Hero Wire channel and stuff like that. Anyway, the idea is I saw this particular video, I got the concept of, the containers, the Docker, but I want to understand how to actually write and implement it. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a couple of prompt questions to GPT regarding that. So let me actually share my screen. Just let me know if my screen is visible. I'm not sure if my screen is visible. Is my screen visible?
Yes, Sanjoy, we can see your screen.
Oh, okay. Perfect. So if you can see, I have this GPT-4, GPT 3.5. I think obviously GPT, for people who are not aware, GPT-4 is a paid version. It's like a GPT Plus. You just have to pay something around, I think 2,100, 2,200 bucks, including, the taxes per month for GPT-4, and GPT 3.5 is like free. You can anyway go ahead and use it. Okay. I'm just going to use GPT-4 for that matter. Just so let's say I'm just going to ask exactly like in a weighted elementum what I got. So I'm going to ask I got a Node.js application, and this Node.js application by default is which is running on port 3000, right? I want to Dockerize this application and run this on port 80. Now, what is port number 3080? So when a developer basically gave me a Node.js application, by default, it is running on port number 3000. And as a DevOps engineer, you have to make sure it runs on a port number 80. Why port number 80? Because any website that you open, by default, it is opening in a port number 80. because the default protocol it uses is the HTTP protocol, and HTTP protocol works on port number 80. Okay, so the idea is obviously you're not going to write, hey, google.com, 3000. Let's say if the Google was written in port number in Node.js, probably you wouldn't have written like, google.com port number 3000. That would have been a very, very stupid way, right? So when you write google.com, just so by default, it means that this google.com is running on port number 80. Okay. Anyway, so now coming back to the question, so idea is like, this is the exact same problem which as a DevOps engineer, you guys are going to face it, right? Where you are going to get a couple of questions. Just give me 1 minute. Okay. So as a DevOps engineer, you are basically going to get this particular error, particular thing that you are going to have this uh, you're going to get an application which is running on port number 3000 or whatever the port number, and they'll expect you to run it on a port number 80. So I basically asked the same question that, hey, look, the Node.js application is running on a port number, and I want to dockerize the application and run this on port number 80. I want you to give me step by step guidelines to create Docker image and write Docker file. Okay, write content of the Docker file. Right. So let's say I'm just going to write a very, very easy prompt with a layman understanding. No understanding about technical terms. It's basically going to give me a complete guide like, hey, look, you need to install Docker, which is pretty good. So I got a Docker install as well, which is fine. It's going to ask me navigate to your project, create a Docker file. Now it's going to say that, hey, look, you need to create a Docker file. And the Docker file, it basically, explained me which version I'm going to use. Right. Now, can you just see this Docker file? And even in a layman term, can you tell me, which version of Node it is utilizing? Anyone on the chat? Can you guys tell me on which version of Node it is utilizing? Exactly. So this one is basically working on Node versions 14, right? So obviously, this was written in Node version 18, for example. We know probably this is going to be a problem. So it says use the official Docker as a base image. So when the GPT basically generates a response, you need to read through them as well. Okay. So again, it basically gave me an idea that, hey, look, this is the steps that you are going to follow. This is how to build the application. This is how to run the application, complete structure like that. And basically gave me that, hey, you are supposed to run on a local host like this. So it kind of like, gave me a complete idea on how I'm supposed to go. Now, the problem is if you run an application, your application is not working, definitely. And then you identify that there is a version mismatch. So you can write, my application was created using Node.js version 18. So now it's basically going to give you the idea. As a layman, person, I have no idea about the entire thing. I'm just like kind of following what my master GPT is basically giving me an idea. And as a DevOps professional, I can tell you like this prompt, this output that it has generated, it's basically the correct one. Okay. Anyway, so it basically gave me the complete idea. I just follow this idea, and you can get the work done. So this is like a very, very simple idea to get the work done with the generative AI. Now, there are a couple of things. The thing is that, okay, so these are a couple of things that, where the generative AI is going to work. What are downsides? The downsides are the, information which has not been updated. For example, recently, a couple of years back, um, Kubernetes has kind of is not utilizing Docker as of now to create the containers for them. Instead, they're basically utilizing CRIO for that. Okay. Um, so the thing is like, probably the GPT does not have an idea about how to work with that. In those kind of scenarios, that is exactly where the documentation come into play. Or, for example, let's say you are utilizing AWS and you are using some new, services created by the AWS, and probably about these services, these learning models does not, language model does not have an idea. And that is exactly where the problem come in. So as a DevOps engineer, my particular suggestion is that yes, use a GPT wherever you require it, but at the same time, read the documentation, read the official documentation, see when the official documentation was created. Okay, what are the changes which is there? So I keep on explaining like the same thing to all of my learners in the DevOps batch 2 as well, or batch 1. People are, if you guys are already there, that reading documentation is a key. We tend to not read the documentation, watch some YouTube video and think we are going to replicate it. Not gonna work. Not gonna work. Have a habit of reading the documentation, and then instead of probably just going on YouTube and watching 7 years back of video, you can do better than that using the GPT, right? So this is like a small demo of how to work around with the Dockerized application. Yes, Sanjay, over to you. So this is pretty much clear. So Ahmad has a question. Hi Sanjay and Prashant, kindly explain how front end and back end part of the same application is connected. How are they being Dockerized? So you create like different Docker versions for that, okay, and you connect with that. So why don't I just so what I'm going to do is, let's do this example, and I'm going to write the same kind of thing into my Docker application. So I'm going to ask the the GPT. I want to I let's I have front end created in, I don't know, React, which is running on port 3000, and my backend, which is Node.js, which is running on port 3000. I want to okay, let's make it more complicated by putting two different ports for them. Okay, I want to Dockerize this port application separately and connect them such a way that the entire application works. I guess this is the same question, Ahmad, you are asking, right? Ahmad, if I'm not wrong, can I see your yes, no, if you are there in the session? If you are there in the session, right? And I can just write, can you give me step by step guidelines using Docker file and deploying steps in EC2. So what I'm going to do is I'm even adding like one more step that I want to deploy in AWS EC2. So I'm even like, having that. So I'm basically asking the entire question in a very, simple manner. Okay. And now the Docker is basically, the GPT is basically going to give me the complete output about it. Okay, it's going to write, hey, for the React front end, this is how the application is supposed to be. You have Node version 18 being run. You're going to run it as npm start. Similarly, you build the application using this particular command, which is pretty good. Then you run this application on the back end. Okay, you run this application. It says that, you want to run this application, blah, blah, blah. So you run the front end and the back end as well. Okay. And so idea is that when you are running this application, which means your backend is running on port number 4000, and in your front end, wherever you are making an API call, you just have to specify localhost 4000. Okay, that is one change that you have to basically make. So you make those changes, then you basically follow up the entire process over here. Okay, which is written, and kind of things which you can actually get the work done. So it's basically taking one more example, that is basically even pushing your application into your Docker Hub account, and pulling the application, making just running the application. That's it. So you can see, like, find the IP address of your EC2 instance and run the application using 3000 for the backend, for the front end, and internally, wherever you are going to make backend from the front end in the JavaScript, this is exactly where the developers are going to come across, and they have the responsibility of changing the application or the backend code over there. So this is like one of the changes which the developer has to make, and pretty much done. More or less, like, this is the idea which has been done. Yeah. So I think it is done.
And I would just like to understand one thing. So the whole exercise that you did just now, right? What amount of time uh, exactly you are saving? In the sense that, we are used ChatGPT to build this Docker Compose file, right? Now, what kind of efficiency are we talking about? What is usually would be the time if you're not doing it without ChatGPT? What would be the time that would be taken? And then we did it in like 5 minutes, right? We built the whole piece. So what kind of time, what is the efficiency are we talking about here?
Perfect. So I would like to answer this particular question in two perspectives. One, the perspective of a beginner people, okay, who just started learning DevOps and he's like, trying to work on the DevOps. And the other one would be someone who is a seasoned developer, DevOps engineer, and like, have fair amount of experience in working with the DevOps and different, tools and structure around it. As a beginner, the couple of problem which I have seen, I've taken a lot of interviews, I've seen, like, working with the beginners as well. What they are done is, like, they get stuck in these steps. What are they going to be the next step? For example, Ahmad just asked me, hey, how I'm just going to make things work, how I'm going to deploy the application, what I'm supposed to write in the Docker file and stuff. So they get stuck in small things like this. And the problem is that this is exactly where the bugs arise for the beginners, that they are not well versed with it. They have an idea, they start writing, they might make small mistakes. They might make small mistakes, and because of this mistake, the deployment is not working. You go back, you try to figure out what the problem is, and this debugging process takes time. Now, debugging in a coding for the coder is pretty easy because you see the error messages. Debugging in DevOps is a bit complicated. It's a very bit complicated because sometimes you don't see an error, but the application is not working. So you need to put your brain across what might have gone wrong, because I have no idea where the application is going wrong because I don't see any particular error into the application. So
Okay.
so this is one of on the beginner side, because in the beginner side you get a complete documentation on how to work. Now
So
that
what I hear from you is that beginners, I think for a beginner of DevOps who are doing it DevOps for the first time, ChatGPT may not be a very generative AI is not going to be a lot of helpful item because you
no,
won't
for
not be
for the
able to
beginner,
debug thing, right?
yeah, for the beginner, I think, like, it is very helpful because they will make less amount of mistakes.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's like everything is formatted. For example, just now
Mm-hmm.
we saw about, like, hey, I want to deploy an application in EC2 instance, and for
Mm-hmm.
any developer would have got stuck, would have asked Google about, probably would have learned, saw a
Okay.
couple of blogs which might be
Okay.
outdated and stuff, and
Okay.
so they get a proper documentation for that. For
Mm-hmm.
advanced people, they already know the flow. For them, the GPT is going to spend, save time in writing a Docker application, Dockerize.
Right.
So for example,
Okay.
let's say you wrote a 50 line of Docker code. At the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, you have to write it, right?
Hmm.
Well, so these GPTs basically write everything down for you. You just copy paste. Again,
Okay.
let's say 50 lines of code, you need to write, let's say, half an hour, think through it, okay, and stuff like that. Okay, probably that's going to save. So what I've seen, in the tendency is, like, for beginner people, get up, efficiency of something around 10 to 15x. And if you are a seasoned DevOps engineer, or seasoned in all of this infrastructure, your efficiency will get something around 2.5 to 3x.
Okay. Understood. Understood. Now this brings us to the next segment of my question. See, what I understand in ChatGPT is right. For any type of generative AI, it has a self life. In the sense, it has some limitation. I think if you look at using ChatGPT, it has September 2021.
Yeah.
So DevOps being something which is evolving very fast, right? In 2000, I think there are a lot of things that have happened in different DevOps tool after September 2021, where ChatGPT will not be able to do anything, or is going to give you erroneous results, right? There might be versions of Kubernetes that have come out, different tools that have come up, right? And then ChatGPT would have no idea what has happened with with those tools. Now that's one thing. That do you see this trend? Do you see the impact that probably a generative AI which is making on development? Do you see that kind of impact is being made on DevOps? And the second question is that so I think DevOps and the next step to DevOps is typically MLOps and SecOps, right? Or there's a security ops or something.
Yeah,
Which all of
DevSecOps.
this is going to come under one big umbrella. Like if people are talking about platform engineering as well. So all of these are going to come under one big umbrella, and then being MLOps being something which is very much working with data, and there might be more and more. A lot of people are making. I know couple of companies that they're trying to make their own LLMs, right? It's all about data. So do you think that the advent of ChatGPT, a lot of people, the market moving into creating their own generative AI models, right? Will that help somehow creating more and more jobs in DevOps? So how do you see that how impactful ChatGPT A from perspective of how it's growing, and also that what I firmly believe, I'll come to my perspective as well, that ChatGPT, do you think that ChatGPT is going to aid in creating more and more DevOps market, right? In as a market, I'm not talking about job numbers here, but it's all are depending on the market. Does it really it feels like that the deployment, the scaling up, the scaling down, which are with the typical outcome of a DevOps piece, it becomes more and more relevant when you talk about MLOps and SecOps, and when people start building more and more ML applications and AI applications.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, coming back to my perspective on the first part, which is, how the GPT is going to act, because so when I see, because I have like, fair bit of amount of experience as working as a developer as well. And the amount of, the replica or the work that you can get out of as a developer is probably where you have a limitation in the DevOps. Because as I mentioned, just now Sanjay mentioned about, DevOps knowledge limited till September 2021, and there have been a lot of development which is coming across. The idea of a DevOps engineer, right, is that we always focus on the performance. How actually can we, we increase the performance of a website? At the same time, we don't want to spend that much amount of money, which means we want higher performance and lower amount of money. Now, when we actually go with the tools, and there have been like developments which is coming across, the new tools, new techniques which is coming into the market, who is exactly focusing on that. So if you use the GPT as it is right now, okay, probably it's going to get the task done, but may not be as efficient as you're expecting. Okay, maybe you might have to spend like $50 for this particular deployment, which is going to like $50 a month that you have to pay for that. But with the knowledge which is currently now right now in the market, probably there has been some new tool which has come into the market, which is like reducing the costing by 5 times. Okay, so probably instead of $50, you're spending $10, and the thing is that you have no idea. And this is exactly what we do in our courses as well, Sanjay. What we do is like we give we see like what are the new tools which is actually coming in market in less than 2 months or 3 months. Okay, whatever which is in the course, I mean, new tools are in the market, and even if it's not part of the course as well, we can kind of like I basically try to come across with some industry experts who have worked couple of months on this particular tools and can actually show me the power of this particular tool, and about maybe even the name of this tool is not aware. I mean, the GPT is not aware of this of the name of the tool as well.
Understood. Understood.
Right.
So just to, I think I just saw a couple of questions on what DevOps is and what is this, right? So I'll just Probably I'll take Prashant couple of minutes to
Sure, sure.
explain this in a layman perspective. So think about any application needs to be deployed, right? For people who are completely zero, then for like understanding DevOps for the first time. So think about that. This is an application we need to deploy, right? So if you are looking to deploy an application, that particular deployment has two teams involved. One team which is basically developing the application, and the other team which is an operational team which is deploying the application. When you talk about deploying, putting that server, all the people, four or five people actually develop the application, and from there on they're making the movement to production server, that when I move that code to a production server, it is available for proper user to use. Now there is a basic conflict to this, right? With the world of agile, with the world of FSD, when you talk about that we want to build application, we want to add and update application as fast as possible. We want to build new features in every 1 week, every 2 weeks, right? So one side, the developer is always looking at agility, that I should be able to make a code and then I just make some changes in the code. I build a feature today, and that feature should be there in the product tomorrow. Now developer is always looking at that. So there are certain tools who is responsible of doing that. But the operational people are always worried. Why they are worried? Because they are thinking that developer is making something which might create a lot of bug, which might create an issue in stability, right? Which might create a lot of other problems. So the operation people are always worried that I need a stable application which have been tested, which have been been validated, and performance have been validated and all. So that there is a fight that goes on between the development team and the operational team. So DevOps comes across as a culture from the company. They said, no, we will try to find a middle ground, and we're going to use certain tools and certain processes. Tools comes in the later piece, right? The culture is the first piece, that I'm going to implement DevOps culture, which said that we will look at DevOps as a separate entity. It's not going to be an operational team, not going to be a development team. There will be a team will be part development, part operation. Will create a process, and that process derives, for that particular process, you need to use certain tools. That is what a DevOps is. That includes backend application deployment, that includes front-end application deployment, that includes database deployment, that includes a simple configuration deployment as well. If it's something as complicated as Ruby on Rails, which has a lot of configuration involved, right? Which is a simple application, maybe like a Java, which doesn't have a lot of configuration. Maybe it's front-end, backend, and database deployment, depending on what exactly you are deploying, right? So, and it might be as simple as setting up an Nginx server for your application to get deployed. So it's a lot of different tasks involved, but the whole culture, we look at a process where we should be able to build an application, build a process or an infrastructure where the developer can seamlessly build application and deploy it in the production. That's one problem that DevOps is solving. The second problem, as everybody is looking at, is like scalability. Like, and I keep on giving that example of an IPL final. That if an IPL final you have 155, you have 2.3 crore people watching. At 2 or 210, there'd be like 15,000 people watching the same Hotstar, right? From same Geo Cinema. Then how do you build that kind of infrastructure? You need to automate that infrastructure. It cannot be people who will be doing it, right? So that is again a DevOps coming in. So there are two problem statements that DevOps is solving. One problem statement is ability for the developer, ability for the whole business to build application seamlessly, and where we can have the developer to user, that time maybe shorten up to 1 week. That I'm a developer, I build a feature and it's there in the hand of the user. That's one problem statement that DevOps is solving. And when more and more users are coming in, and then how do we scale it, descale it, elastic scale it, whatever term it, but how do you make that application so efficient and also performance heavy? That is what a DevOps is. So and I keep on telling, because to a lot of my students and everywhere I talk to, it's not, when you're trying to understand the term, try to understand what problem that we are solving, because all of us are engineers, right? We talk them engineers are there to solve a problem. So we are a DevOps is basically solving a very critical couple of problems, which is enabling every applications here. And ChatGPT or generative AI is also solving certain amount of problem. So can we take that GPT and generative AI and then solve our problem faster? So that probably should, answer questions of Ahmed and people who are little bit new to DevOps. Is that okay, Ahmed, and a lot of people who ask like we're completely new to DevOps? Does that kind of give you an idea that what DevOps is and what DevOps does? Guys, can I have some hands or saying it's not? Some yes, some no. Sure, sure. Okay, great. Yeah, Prashant. So then the next part of the question, which is how do you see the future, right? When you talk about the MLOps piece, the SecOps piece, how does it impact the DevOps market as such? And how do you see the future evolving with ChatGPT and DevOps together?
Sorry. So to be honest, when we talk about the market in general, okay, um, market in general is very, very like responding very, very good. To be honest, okay. The idea with the market is that the market is basically saying, hey, look, you have a lot of opportunity with the DevOps because the cloud is still in the phase where it needs another at least a couple of more years to come across where the development and everything is standing right now. So this is like you can say like it's a train which is on a very, very fast developing stage, and even the all the AI tools which is out there, they need information, they need more and more information to give proper output for that. So I see if you are basically taking up this course, or if you are actually entering into the DevOps field, the idea would have been that uh, you are first you are making an early entry. So even if the GPT gives you some answer, you actually are very, very quick to identify that, hey, look, GPT, you made a mistake like that. Or if you want to ask a very, very pinpointed question about, for example, let's say I want to, deploy at port number 80, I want to deploy in port number 3000, how do I connect and stuff like that. Until unless understand the entire flow, you probably might not be able to ask you the pinpointed answer. Okay. So for example, what is a Docker image? What is a Docker container and stuff like that? So couple of knowledge is there. Now, how the AIs are basically going to automate the process? Yes, there are a couple of traditional process which are still being used. So if I actually give you some rough number around it, I would suggest you that approximately 45% of the tasks that we do in a DevOps on a day-to-day basis is kind of a traditional method, which is like, hey, I'm just going to, use some Linux command. I'm going to run, Linux input and stuff like that. So all of these commands and everything, which is basically going to do is like, coming across from the traditional method. Or maybe I want to write some automation script in Python. Okay, and stuff like that. So again, 45% of the task is basically there, which we are basically reutilizing. And GPT or any language model which is into play has a good amount of resources, has a good amount of power to basically help us in pushing that up. So instead of considering GPT as a threat, you can consider GPT as as your friend, which is basically getting your task done very, very quickly. Now, in this era, if you don't, skill up, you probably will fail. So I don't want you guys. I also am giving like an underlining warning, and I'm just going to kind of relate it with the example of Nokia. Okay, Nokia did nothing wrong. Okay, but still failed, right? And so I don't want you guys to be a Nokia, but I want you guys to be an Apple. Okay, where you keep on innovative, you keep on innovate yourself, you keep on upskill yourself with the knowledge. And that is why on a daily basis I spend at least around 15-20 minutes on a daily basis to read some new article, to read some new documentation on a DevOps piece, to read some new tools and everything around it. Okay, so idea is to more like a collaborative work, collaborative sharing of the knowledge, than to kind of like considering it as a competition.
Okay. So just to put my bit of scent on it, because because see whenever we look at so DevOps is a lot of people are looking at what is an impact of GPT into the tech market, right? So yes, coding jobs would be impacted because GPT will be able to do much more from a coding perspective. But from a DevOps perspective, the roles like DevOps and probably a little bit of cybersecurity is where we are a lot of evolving tools have been there. So GPT will not be able to help. So that's going to be there. And there will be more and more cybersec and DevOps people needed in different all of this application, because now we'll be all talking about high volume, and scalability, and DevOps will be a major role. So it's going to have a positive impact in security and in DevOps space. It's going to have a negative impact. I personally belong to a coding world, development world, so I know that is going to have a negative impact, and it's going to create a major I hate to use the word, a very major capitalist world, right? People who know develop, know GPT, how to use them will move high, and then people who will not be, there's a major difference it will create. So I took a question which is a very relevant question. While we make use of GPT for writing Docker files and other scripts, wouldn't it be compliance as sharing sensitive data with external AI service might raise security and privacy concern? Absolutely yes. So now that is a major question. That's why if you look at any bank today, any healthcare today, any nobody has, everywhere ChatGPT is banned, right? It's absolutely right. I was talking to somebody in Capgemini. I was talking to somebody in Fidelity. Everywhere is banned, right? But that doesn't mean that you said there is an elephant in the room, and you can ignore it to a certain amount of time, and then you can do this, that people have to find a way to do this. But if you're working as an individual capacity, working for a startup, they don't care, right? It's all about efficiency. It's about making things work faster. If there is and then there is, and this company is a traditional piece where security is a major concern, will take time to adopt it. But there is a skill set. I know personally, there are, even in Deloitte, even in Accenture, they are creating a practice which is DevOps practice, which is sorry, in GPT, GPT practice or a generative AI practice, right? For them, they're trying to build that, and there are people expecting it. But in today's world, because people know very little about it, so they are bigger firms, bigger companies would not really allow it to use in their network. But you need to be rest assured that you, again, you, if there's an elephant in the room, it's still so much time, right? You cannot just keep on ignoring it. Maybe not today, maybe in a couple of years from now, you have to accept there is this elephant that is sitting in your room. Okay. That's typically what it is. I think we are able to answer all of the questions, I believe.